Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Photography Show and to this session, this student and graduation panel session, Where Now? And I think when we thought about this session, in fact, when the pandemic first hit, the thing that became very obvious was that it was going to be a strange year to graduate, and work was going to be very different to how it normally is. And so we concentrated a lot of effort on supporting students and graduates and people new to the profession. And so that's the sort of background to this session. And we've got a lovely panel who are going to explore these ideas. I'm just trying to work out if I can just press a button. There we go, and then I can see actually, because I still have the full screen with the presentation. So it is a challenging time to go into work, but we think there's also lots of possibilities, and that's what we're going to explore this morning. And I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to give a quick introduction to themselves, and what I'm going to mention is just to say a little bit about who you are and what your work is, and perhaps what's changed for you over the last 6 months. So my name is Paul Herman. I'm the director of Red Eye, the Photography Network, and we offer quite a lot of events and resources for people working in photography. So what's changed for us is that over the last 6 months, well, immediately all of our events went online, which enabled us to actually double the number of events we could offer. So that was something, and everything else pretty much stayed the same. So we have been working away at that. So over to you, Lauren. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. So welcome everyone. So my name is Lauren, and I work as the editor of Digital Photographer magazine, which I grabbed a few copies of here. I am, I suppose, a journalist, but I'm a photographer by training. So I graduated from Falmouth University 6 years ago. And I've been working kind of in the sort of journalism and media ever since. What's changed for us, I think, in the past 6 months is, as soon as the pandemic hit, people stopped going to shops, people stopped buying magazines in a traditional way. So we've been working with sort of very reduced budgets, different freelancers thinking of creative ways of working that don't use budget, and looking at how we can use content in new ways and leverage that, really. And things are getting a bit better now. But it's been an interesting time, very creative time.
Thanks very much. And over to you, Alex.
Hi, so I'm an on-location pet photographer. I've been a professional for 3 years now. I have had to work to restrictions. I've had to cancel but move sessions around, but also not all of my work has been affected. So I've been able to fill those gaps with commercial photography as well that I've been able to do from home. So it's not been too bad. It's been all right.
Thanks, Alex. And Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fisher. I'm the director of Open Eye Gallery. So we're a gallery. So obviously we closed last March. But I think we're a gallery, but we also do a lot of work with communities. We have a big socially engaged programme. So a number of the artists that we work with continue to work with communities in really different ways, some of which were working online, particularly with younger people. Some were actually working with older people, and they were doing it via post. They were making and disinfecting artist packs, which were going out to people's doors, and then they were using phones, ringing people to talk to them about how they got on with the work. Some of them, it was a mixture of both. So some sort of social distancing, some photo walks, that kind of thing. And then in terms of what we've been doing, other than that, we've done an online programme. And actually, although it has been very difficult in many ways without the gallery being open, and we've been furloughing part-time, we've actually developed much more, very, very quickly, much more adept online skills, which has meant that our talks programme has been very interesting and taken off. We've done a number of online commissions with different photographers. We've developed, or we're developing, an international programme, a UK Hong Kong programme, which Paul and Red Eye are part of, which involves 22 organisations, and we've been also working quite closely on international programmes that are coming up. So it's sort of enabled us to work. We're working with Australia at the moment a lot. So it's enabled us to actually work with partners elsewhere in perhaps a more in-depth way. Normally we would be getting on a plane and going out and meeting people, which isn't great for the planet anyway. And what's happened is that we're managing to have many more meetings actually, and take things further and start to commission new works internationally and with partners nationally as well. And then apart from that, I do quite a lot of strategic work, which is probably a little bit boring for here, so I won't mention it. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And maybe I can invite people. We've got about 40 or 50 people coming in at the moment. So if you want to just pop, if you feel like it, pop your name in the chat and maybe who you are, what you're, maybe a tiny line about what you're up to. It's just lovely to see who's here. And you also have a Q&A panel, and we already have one question, which I'm going to come back to later. So thank you for that. But if you have a direct question for one of us, do pop it in the Q&A panel. Or if you just want to mention something, just pop it in the chat window. That would be great to hear. And I think that, Sarah, that thing you mentioned, that sort of changing direction, that resourcefulness, that flexibility. Alex, you and I were talking about what it is to be a photographer, and that being an essential part of it. But say a bit more about that, Alex. What was sort of what was your approach and your attitude at college and beyond?
So I'm trying to think now. Yeah, sorry, say the question again, sorry.
Yeah, no, we were talking about you'll always be doing something, always try something. And I think that's such use. And I think the thing about, you know, trying out a lot of different things, a lot of which won't work, but talk a little bit more about that attitude of.
Yeah, so I think just having a good work ethic and being proactive is really important, whether it is learning something new or starting to build the foundations or getting out there and finding work, because you're only going to get out of it what you put in. And it might not always go your way, but I think this is the time where you can afford to make those mistakes and get those experiences, because they're going to help you in the future, definitely.
Lauren, do you recognise that in some of the people who've been submitting work in the last few months?
Absolutely. I think diversifying at any stage of your career and at any point in the industry is really important, because there's always going to be fluctuations kind of in the market and what people are looking for. And I think that ability to learn and to adapt, I don't think you ever, just because you've graduated from university, I don't think that means you then stop learning. I think the best photographers I know are the ones that are constantly learning, constantly curious, asking questions and kind of reaching out to people and working with new people. So yeah, definitely. I think it's very important throughout your career. And we, within that, obviously photographers have their own values and their own voice. And that's a really important thing to develop. Something that Zoe Wishaw told me, she's a mentor for photographers, and she just said, if you're not sure what your values are, really have a think about it. Have a sit down and work out what's important to you, and then how does that reflect in the work you're trying to do? And that might take you into new sorts of directions. But Sarah, I think you must encounter a lot of people like that who are sort of, if you like, value driven. Sorry for that expression, but people who know what they're trying to do in life as much as in photography. Do you want to say a bit about it?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as I said, we work a lot with socially engaged practice and socially engaged photographers, and many of them, their raison d'etre is to make a living, but the driving force for them is to develop change, social change. And many of those practitioners as well have come from very different places. So I'm kind of thinking of, really great photographers like Emma Case is a good example of a photographer who was actually making her money as a wedding photographer. And she recognized within a lot of her practice was about helping people to fulfill their image of themselves and develop their image of themselves. And so she started actually working slightly differently, working with community groups, different community groups. And you may know some of her projects. So there's a project called Red. You will do if you're a Liverpool football fan. I struggle with this. Everyone in Liverpool is a football fan, apart from me, I think, probably. But anyway, she's developed this project, which is with the fans of Liverpool football team. And it's their images that she's actually showing and sharing in that particular project. She's working for us on a different project in Clubmore, where she's working with groups of local people to develop their voice, and often that includes her photography as well. It's a mix of their photography and her sharing some of the skills. But all of the socially engaged photographers that I work with started out with this idea that actually they'd quite like their photography to do something in the world which would make change. And I think it sounds very worthy, socially engaged practice, but I think actually what Alex is doing with her pet photography is not a million miles away. And she's actually fulfilling somebody's vision, if you like, working with their pets. She's giving them something which actually adds to their lives. And many of our photographers, it is about enhancing and inspiring. They often work in lower socioeconomic areas or in prisons, or various people with dementia, various sort of routes to working, but they are very definitely value driven. And I'd say if you are somebody who's value driven, have a good think about that, because actually the rewards that those guys get from their projects are many. That they are very fulfilled people. They're not rich people for the most part, but they're making a living, and they are very proud of the work that they do, as are the communities that they work with. So yes, I think values are important, but one doesn't have to be a socially engaged photographer to have a set of values. There's all sorts of photographers that have those different values.
And I think, yes, if you know you love animals, which I assume you do, Alex.
Yes, very much.
Then that helps you to know what you want to do. And I think, don't fight it. And what I hear most often when you're sort of hanging around at portfolio reviews, where people are showing their work to a bunch of different editors or curators or so on, and the phrase that I very often hear is the reviewer saying, "I'm not seeing you in this work. I'm not seeing your personality coming out and your desires and loves." But Lauren, you obviously pick that when you have somebody submit to the magazine, you don't necessarily meet them, do you? But you get a sense of their aims and their values.
I mean, now increasingly so, we kind of work with people from Instagrams and social channels, or I meet people at things like the photography show when it's in its physical form, and people come up to me, and it's often just as much about the person and their passion and, as you say, sort of their vision, as it is about their photos. And you find that some people you just kind of, I don't want to say you click with, I'm trying to think of a better way to describe it, but you can tell those people that are authentic and passionate about what they're doing. And I think it doesn't matter what you are doing, but if you're chasing something that isn't really you, if you're chasing something because you think it's trendy or it's popular or because that's what you should be doing, I think then that's where motivation can wane. So I think, doing something you're passionate about, whatever that is important just to keep motivation up, in times of hardship.
Motivation is critical. So just to interrupt our chat, the chat is actually disabled. I'm sorry about that. I've got that wrong, but there is a few little introductions in the Q&A, which is lovely. A few students in different disciplines, but videography, portrait, fashion and music photographer and so on. So sorry about the chat, but please do keep the questions coming into the Q&A, and I'll pick up some of them, specific ones, in a few minutes. But I wanted to come back to this idea of research. So you have this picture of people graduating. They know what they want to do in life, and hopefully their photography, their art reflects that. And they are motivated. They're trying a whole bunch of different things. And I think never be blocked. Always just have a sort of pot of things you can dip into if something's stuck. If you're stuck on something, the people who seem to do the best are the ones who can pick up something else as they go along. But I did want to talk a bit about research, background research, which is increasingly important. So people, for example, could be presenting projects. They could be, I met a researcher who's, a photographer whose job is to measure the thickness of the ice at the North Pole which is, you need a bit of research there because otherwise you die. So, but that's very, very practical. And other people are doing much more sort of perhaps abstract research that helps them to think about what they're doing. I remember a lovely comment from Adam Broomberg, who works in a sort of duo with Broomberg and Shanarin, it's called. And he said, all of our work is the end product of a conversation. So their research was talking through ideas and talking through the approaches. And that can also come from groups of people that you might link up with or work with. But who'd like to say a little bit more about the importance of the research and how that can affect what you're doing? I don't know if, does one of you want to wave if you want to go first? Sarah, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating area because actually research is all sorts of things, isn't it? It's different things for different people. I think there was a piece of research which actually looked at the Glasgow scene and why it was so successful. And basically it came up with this idea of hunting in packs. It said that graduates were forming groups and working through groups. And therefore they were helping each other, not just to sustain their practice, but also to make connections. So they became it became a sort of model, which a lot of people talk about now, this sort of idea of hunting in packs. And I think what's interesting, it's not that people's networks, in a sense, help with researching anything that you might want to do. And you'd be surprised the number of people that you end up connecting with if you start to build a network. And they are often feeding through information, not just on opportunities, but perhaps on sort of horizon scanning, you know, what's coming up, what's interesting, because they've got an idea of you and the things that you might be interested in. They can actually point to things that you perhaps wouldn't see yourself. Either you've missed it online or they've had a conversation with somebody and it's right for you. And certainly I think for my team, knowing a lot of photographers and knowing what they do, even if we can't give them an exhibition or we can't work with them in that context, often just knowing what they do and what their passion is means that at some point somebody else talks to us about something and we think, oh, do you remember what's the contact details for this person? Because they were actually absolutely doing that. And I think a lot of research is around your arena, but also I would suggest that you do need to research the context that you want to go into. So I often have photographers that meet me when I'm walking through the gallery and say, can I show my work to you? And it can be quite difficult if their work is completely not what we would show in the gallery. And my suggestion would be that if you're going to show work to people, that you actually do a little bit of research beforehand, find out what they're interested in, find out if it's a good fit. So I think there's two things there. One is meeting someone and telling them what you do is one thing. Actually making an appointment or trying to secure their time, you really need to know that they're the right people, because it can actually backfire a little bit if they're not the right people. Because obviously if you are meeting people all the time and they're coming up to you and trying to take your time, obviously it can be quite difficult if it's absolutely not right for your organization or business. So wherever you're thinking of working, do a little bit of research before you go to show people your work, so that the people that you're showing your work, you know, are in the kind of arena that have already some interest or are working in that field. Save you a lot of time, but also enable you perhaps to make very useful contacts, which you can keep going then via email.
Honestly,
so I think research is about knowing the arenas that you can go into and whether they're right for you.
Thank you. And it's so true. And, you know, one job application where you really want to work for the person or the organization and you show that in the application is worth 100 sort of blanket send outs. That's often what people find is if they really think, well, I'd love to assist so-and-so, or I'd love to work at this place. You do your research. Exactly. You think about how you're going to approach them. You work out who's the right person to approach, and it opens up some doors for you. Alex, you talked a bit about the sort of all of the work you do around the business. And I suppose the research must be everything from locations, but also clients. And do you want to talk a little bit about what research you do and what background work you do to sustain the business?
Yeah, definitely clients. So knowing who your clients are, because you can't really reach them if you don't really know who they are. So I know who my typical clients are, and that actually most of the time they already know what it is they want. So I want to be there with my website and everything ready, waiting to draw them in to me. And then lots of research. I would say for me, what you were saying, Sarah, about networking with other people, that's definitely a big one for me. Through surrounding yourself with the other people from my sector, and for me it's a lot of the social groups as well that I'm a part of, and just everyone together and discussing advice. And I get it's really good.
Getting plugged into the right networks is such an important thing. We talked about that before, but it's how do you do that? Well, if you are where you live, there might well be some local arts networks. That's probably slightly less relevant now, but I think there's tons of other possibilities. We'll put up a list of links and resources at the end, which includes some other possibilities for networks to join. Lauren, did you want to come in on that whole question of group and collaborative working and networks and so on?
I think what Sarah was saying was really about, in terms of researching the person that you're approaching. I think that comes around marketing yourself and pitching ideas. I think you've got to kind of think of yourself, it's a bit cheesy, but almost think of yourself as a brand. You know, what are your selling points? What are you about? And in terms of who you're pitching towards, in a practical sense, if someone's pitching to me, I always like it if they've actually looked at the magazine, or if they know what you do, they know what kind of photographers you feature, and you can often tell whether someone's sending out a blanket kind of email to everyone they've ever met, or whether they really are interested in working with you. And I mean, I do the same if I'm approaching photographers that I'd love to work with, or if I'd love to partner with, a camera brand or something. It's really important to know who their readers are, or who their customers are and their clients are. And I think you can do that in all spheres, whether you're approaching galleries or commercial clients, or if you want to be a wedding photographer, knowing what your couples and your customers want. So I think,
I want to turn to how things have changed during the pandemic. And I think we know already that the skills of a photographer, they're flexible, they do their research, they potentially collaborate and work in groups if they need to. They're always, trying different things. But I think during the pandemic, obviously things have changed a bit, and we can imagine that things like event photography is not massively happening at the moment, whereas other areas might be growing. And I think when we looked at that, we saw that there seemed to be quite a lot of public commissions, which I'll come back to. There's quite a lot of news photography going on still. And there might be possibilities for people like wedding photographers who might actually suddenly have a more important role. If you've got a wedding that is just a dozen people instead of 100, somehow the photographs could become more important. So I think it's really just a question of thinking around these subjects and working out what the possibilities are, and then making contact with people. But I wonder if any of you would like to talk about areas of work that are different. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to bring up a question that actually two people have asked. So Nicola McCloskey, your college is closed. We could go back, but still online learning. Nicola's visually impaired. So she's asking about online skills and will they be more inclusive for disabled people in the future? It's such a good question. And then Josephine says she recently graduated from Falmouth University, marine and natural history photography. We didn't get to do all the exhibitions that the universities put together for students. So I think that was a sort of, I think obviously education and training and learning it will be different, and we don't know how long for. Certainly some of the universities have put on their sort of online, some virtual exhibitions and so on. But I think that side of it is super interesting. And I mean, I very much take your point, Nicola, that online learning can be very difficult for certain people. And we are detecting that the people who come to our online events and courses are slightly different than the ones who came to our physical ones. And we haven't yet, I think it's difficult for everyone to get to the bottom of exactly what's happened. But I think I'm going to throw it back to Alex, Lauren, or Sarah, if you want to talk about which bits of work are changing, and perhaps you could reference that sort of learning environment, how you think people will learn going forward. So who wants to wave?
You just asked me first. Oh, Paul, I'll always have something to say. Yeah, I mean, just to come back to the first question, I think in terms of artists that have a disability, I think the world is changing. There's some fantastic organisations out there that are working very hard to change the world. I mean, we have a partnership with Dada in Liverpool, and we're also partnering Venture Arts, looking at their younger artists and doing mentoring workshops with them. And I think one of the big questions that has actually been posed in terms of public funding is around the diversity of those voices that are being heard and how they're being heard. So I think the art world is changing, probably not fast enough. But I think one of the issues, I think, in terms of developing work during COVID is very much around how do we make it accessible? And because there's so many different ways in which people need to access material, that question for us is often around, we request that people contact us if they have specific needs, or if we can use things that will make accessibility easier. We've done a whole range of things in the past, but obviously whatever you do doesn't serve everybody. And if somebody wants to take part, it's our fault that they can't. So we are very aware of that. And I think the public sector is becoming ever more aware of that. But I think the digital arena does also offer a lot of potential for people in all sorts of ways. I think a much more diverse showcasing of artists is happening digitally, in part because people have been in lockdown and they're looking at what they can do to support artists. So, and I think for us, that's been numerous commissions, a lot of Instagram takeovers, so artists taking over our Instagram feeds for a period of time so they can showcase their work. We have a website which is completely open access. It's called Open Stories, and you can send in a series of works to be uploaded onto that website, again, to share with the world. And I think one of the things that I'm very aware of in the digital sphere is that sometimes it's quite hard to get a following for artists, because there's a lot of people obviously out there showcasing their work. And certainly if you're thinking about within the public sector, being seen, being heard is quite hard. And actually having a website often isn't enough because people won't find it. So I think it's looking at those shared platforms, which we will all look at from the public sector's point of view. So there is the sort of, Red Eye's great, Access Web, etc. Paul will give you a little list, but also working with there's quite a lot of support agencies out there that have been very active actually online. People like Shutterhub and others, they've been very active online, Grain. And actually, I think they'll continue to be active online, which actually helps everybody, because many of those networks are probably most strong where they're based, where the organisation's based, and perhaps less strong as you move away from that base because they have physical events. However, I think increasingly, online getting together whichever network you might join, whichever network you can show through, is making a real difference. I think I'm just on that last question of graduates. I really feel for graduates this year. I mean, I think they have been robbed. I know that some courses have done excellent online versions of, but I think it is very problematic, and many of us are mentoring and working on physical shows in the future with graduates, and trying to showcase work via our platforms. But I think it is also perhaps an opportunity for you to actually think about getting together with groups of your colleagues, particularly colleagues that work in a similar way, and thinking about what you might do online to actually get your work out there, and then leaning on people that you know that have significant followings, to actually share your work for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think both devastating and actually opening up more opportunities simultaneously.
Yes, I mean, it's really interesting talking to people through this 6-month period. For the first, so there's a lovely question that's coming from Rodney. As a business owner, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome in these past months, personally and professionally? And I think we can probably all talk about ourselves, but also perhaps other examples of people we've encountered. And I think certainly when the lockdown started, a lot of people threw their hands up and felt they weren't sure what to do. And I think by coming to things, by going to Zoom meetings, meeting people, talking through, there's so many possibilities for talk and support and just throwing ideas around. And many of those people, after a couple of months, had started to pick up something different, had started to understand the other possibilities. Rihanna says, Sarah, can you repeat the website for Open Stories? So if you just mention that name again.
It is literally www.openstories.org.uk, I think, or .co.uk, one of those.
One of those. We can find you. Lauren, I don't know if you wanted to come back on that, or we're nearly out of time. So I'm going to sort of go to my final question. If you wanted to jump in quickly on that. Yeah, go for it.
So biggest challenges. I mean, I think anyone coming out of university, unless they've got a job sign up, is going to be a freelancer, presumably. And when lockdown hit, I mean, I've been a freelancer before, but it was like going back to being freelance. So it was coming to finding that motivation to work. I would say for anyone starting out, it's very overwhelming, but start small. So don't try and run before you can walk, all of those cliches, but break down what it is you do, who you want to work with, and just start somewhere. Because if you start somewhere, if you send out a few emails, you can snowball the effect. And I think, again, being isolated, the power of community is very important, both for motivation, for inspiration. So I did a lot of work with a Facebook community called SheClicks, which is all around women in photography. And that was sort of what kept me very motivated with webinars and things during the period. So routine, join communities of like-minded photographers, and sort of just go for stuff.
Thank you very much. So maybe Alex, do you have any sort of final top tips that you, if sorry, it's a bit cheesy, isn't it? But I think any final bits, what would you say to somebody who's come out of university and is thinking, what on earth do I do? Go on.
Very similar to what Lauren was saying, actually, not to overwhelm yourself or just not to put too much pressure on yourself, because don't worry about what speed others are progressing, because recognition takes time and you're only going to learn through experiences, and there's no shortcuts for that. So exactly what Lauren said, break everything down and reach those steps that you can manage, and just enjoy the journey as well. Because when I first started, I wanted to rush to the finish line, but actually as creators, there is no finish line. You're always going to be reaching those next steps. So I think it's just stepping back a little bit, just taking it in, and I think you learn a lot more from doing that as well.
Thank you very much. And I think that, yes, it's so important. Just the time period that it takes can be quite long. And when you talk to photographers, they say it might take 3, 4, 5, 6 years, even before they felt their work was settling down. And somebody said, you're a good artist at 40, you're a better artist at 50. You know what I mean? It's a game for life. It's a marathon. So just be ready to run a marathon and just find a way to motivate and enjoy yourself. I think that's great advice. Sarah, if you've got any final thoughts and ideas and tips that you'd like to share.
I think just do things and share them. That's it. Do things and share them. That's the starting point. Actually, if you do things and share them, things come of it. And you just keep going. It's tenacity.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I suppose, Lauren, is there anything else you want to add there, or?
I suppose I wanted to say, I've been thinking a lot about mistakes and failure recently, and I think not being afraid to make mistakes, not being afraid to, when you reach out to photographers, oh, are they going to think I'm silly? Are they going to wonder why I've contacted them? Just kind of, trying to do things that are outside of what you feel comfortable with and just not worrying about consequences, because I know, again, it's very cheesy, but you learn so much more from mistakes than you do for things that have gone well. So try not to be fearful.
Good stuff. I suppose I would say, well, I've actually got a little slide. I've got a slide of information. Nick says, is there any resources? Yeah, I'll pop that up. Sharing is never quite as straightforward as you think it's going to be, but give me a second. This is my stolen tip from Wallpaper. But yeah, it is so much about actually being nice, getting on with people. I met a person who commissions photographers for a great, a big sports company. And he said, anytime we need a shot doing, there's 100 people we can choose, and we choose the people who are not going to annoy the tennis stars. I think that's a huge part of it. And then working hard comes up over and over again. But this idea of just finding something to keep you going, finding the sort of support networks and help that you need. I've got a little page, and actually it's quite a big page of next steps. I just suggest you screen grab this, because we've only got another minute to talk about this. But sorry, that's my mistake. Let's go back to that. Red Eye, do come along for online events and resources and information. And we talk a lot about moving into photography as a career and developing your career. And actually next week we have an event about ethics in photography, which will be interesting. But it's most of what we offer at the moment is free. So just have a look at what we're doing. There's everybody else's websites at the top, including beautiful animal photography by Alex, really lovely. If I could ever wake my cat up, I might give you a shout. Plenty of other organizations like us, these development organizations, quite a lot of them are working with people on projects, on artistic projects, on exhibitions, or whatever the equivalent is now. So that's the online communities. There's tons of different ones, all sorts of looking at different areas, but a few to pick out. Sarah mentioned Axis Web, ArtQuest, ProDig for digital queries, ePuck for editorial photographers, Lens Culture, Shutter Hub, Flat Photo, all general sort of work development support. There's a few links about money and work. I would just have a look through them, but they apply to different areas of practice, but depending on where you are, something might be useful there. And there's a few Facebook groups that have popped up since the pandemic started, but antiviral work for freelancers is really super useful, actually, and scrolling back through that. Fairs and festivals do continue in their sort of offline or online way, I should say, but I think it's, if and when they ever come back, it's definitely a good place to meet people, place to network, to see new work and all the rest of it. Professional associations, a lot of these organizations offer things like legal support and advice like that, and insurance and so on. And then if you just want business support, check out the LEP Growth Hubs. It's a lot of business advisors around. This is England, and I think there's equivalents in Scotland, Wales. I'm sorry, not sure if I've got them here, but you can find the equivalents quite easily. But these are places where you can get a free business support session, so it's worth doing. So thank you very much to the wonderful panel. It is now 10:02, 9 minutes to. So, and thank you to the Photography Show for hosting us, and thank you all for coming. I think there was about 60 people in the end. So have a lovely day at the rest of the event, and get in touch if you like. Thank you very much.